Here.
Councilmember Tate. Here. Councilmember Meredith.
Here.
Councilmember Moran.
Here.
Councilmember Sherman Morgan.
Here on the phone.
Manager West.
Present.
Attorney Gore.
Here.
Wonderful. And Lindsay, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, so let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all and welcome. So we will begin tonight's meeting with a comment period. And I've got a bunch of folks who signed up, so we'll begin with Janet Lucas. And so when you come to the mic, please state your name and whether you live in the city or not. Thank you. So Janet Lucas.
Thank you. My name is Janet Lucas, and I do live in the city. And I come here with a group called the Charter for Compassion. And it's an international organization that encourages governments and organizations to adopt compassionate practices. And I come here representing Peninsula College. And I wanted to tell you about a number of efforts at Peninsula College to enact compassion. And one of them, we do this every day as teachers, and going to college, our average age of students is almost 30. And so it's a way to start over and a compassionate act to start over. And I started over myself as a student at Peninsula College at age 35. And education isn't the panacea for all things that ail us, but it goes a long way. Some of the things that we're doing are geared toward trying to help the underprepared student, which many members of our community are. They are from generations of poverty sometimes. They are maybe the first person in their family to ever get a college education. And if your parents aren't educated, you can't just walk into a school and know what to do and how to behave and how to study and how to take on that education as something you need and something you own and something that's going to make it better and make your life and your family's life better. I have a student who works for me in the office where I am, and she was talking about learning math so that she could help her kids with her homework, and before she couldn't. We are striving for equity at Peninsula College, meaning that we provide enough help for students as much as they need, and we try to ascertain how much that is, and whether it's a little or a lot. We instituted a food pantry recently because we have an awful lot of students who come to school and leave school hungry. We have our goals there are to advance student success, achieve academic excellence, to foster equity and inclusion, and to strengthen our community.
Thank you. Next person, Laurel Hargis.
Laurel Hargis, I am a resident of Port Angeles, I live in the city, and I don't have any eloquent words prepared. I just want to simply state my very strong support for adoption of the Charter of Compassion. Thank you.
Thank you. Ned Hanna.
Hammer, and I do live in the city. So I am a husband, a father of 2 little boys. I'm also a family physician involved in our new residency rural training program for family physicians. And with my 3 minutes, I'd like to tell you briefly why, or where I learned compassion and why I think it's so important for the city of Port Angeles. You see, I learned compassion from a 15-year-old South African boy named Jeffrey Nkosi. Jeffrey grew up under apartheid, and right before medical school, I had the opportunity to live and work in South Africa, right after the end of this terrible history. Our program was there trying to help the schools, and it was an uphill battle. If you can imagine generation upon generation of being told that you weren't good enough, that you weren't smart enough because you were black. Now picture me, this blonde white guy, who looks every bit like, other than I'm a lot skinnier, every bit like all these people who had been telling the black South Africans for generations that they were no good. And I'm there saying, no, it's all right, you're good. As I said, it was an uphill battle. So one day I'm walking up the hill, literally walking up the hill from the village, this swamp where the black South Africans had been relocated in this area under apartheid. And I'm crying because it all felt overwhelming. And I hear these footsteps behind me, and it's my friend Jeffrey Nkosi. And he says, yeah, man, that's how it is. He doesn't correct me, he doesn't try to stop my crying. And then he says, come on, let's go get some bread. We've got half a loaf. Half a loaf is better than no loaf. His family could never afford a whole loaf of bread, but they always shared with me whatever they had. Compassion is that relationship. Compassion is built on an honest seeing of and engaging with another being. It sees the heroin you put into your body and doesn't judge. It doesn't ask you to stop. Rather, it asks you if you want to stop. And if you say yes, then it compels me as a physician to do everything I can in my power to help you stop. And the crazy thing is that there's all this science to support this. Addiction outcomes are better. Cancer, diabetes, obesity, stroke, community outcomes are better. It doesn't matter if you are a tree or a ladybug or another person. My relationship with you is this potential. There's this power that's waiting there, and compassion is the waking up of that power. If after 2 years our medical residents, that's the time they're with us, go out to be doctors without having learned compassion directly from me by an example, I will have taught them nothing. Desmond Tutu, who helped lead the struggle against apartheid, said, my humanity is caught up, is inextricably bound up in yours. We belong in a bundle of life. A person is a person to other persons. Thank you.
Thank you. Barely Smith.
Marilee Smith, Port Angeles. A raccoon looks a little bit like a cat. They both like cat food. But they're not the same animal. Just like for-hire ride companies, taxi cabs, limos, airporters are not the same as gig ride-hailing apps. Or like any other app-enabled gig. Don't screw up the text that we currently have for the taxi limo ordinance with unfocused, nonsensical code that doesn't even attempt to cover the issues. These changes to the existing ordinance are a joke. Do not pass it, fix it. For hire, with meters, employees, local owners, old cars, and the very real ability to rip off customers, should have ordinances to address that. Meanwhile, good luck trying to audit a multinational venture. You can't audit it like you can someone local. Let's get real. Poor drivers don't set the fees. Don't charge the customers. They're just the middlemen here. A ride-hailing app is not a job, it's a gig. It pays poorly after the expenses, your car, your insurance, your gas. Uber Lyft requires robust auto inspections at their approved centers, and you have to pay for it. They require specific insurance
They won't accept a car that's more than 10 years old. Simplify the licensing, cover the real issues. The license, $50 a year, is a greedy money grab. That's what's in the ordinance. It hurts the poor little guys who are trying to put some money in their pocket. You know, Tacoma and Seattle also have those licenses, and if you go drive there, which most people here will have to do to make enough money, you also have to pay more licenses. It could be well over $300 a year. So let's let our citizens make money, don't break them. Make this easy. Do a separate ordinance for the apps. It'll be an easy to delete ordinance. Rideshare apps may not exist in 5 years. Look what happened in Austin. Uber right now is bleeding cash. So far, they've spent $900 billion to set up this company. Do you really think they're profitable? Because they're not. They're not taxis. They're people eking out pocket change. Let's separate the gig-specific ordinances, streamline it, and make it relevant. The ordinance is very embarrassingly ignorant. For the record, digital networks, as it's put in the ordinance, means nothing. Thank you.
Brendan Meyer.
Hi, Brendan Meyer, citizen of Port Angeles. A couple days ago, I noticed the fence go up to install the permanent fence around the Liberty Bell. I was here and spoke in favor of protecting the Liberty Bell, but not at the cost of putting it behind bars. So it's unfortunate that that's what it came to, the lack of creativity when coming up with a solution for the Liberty Bell, to protect the Liberty Bell. Secondly, I heard that a video has made its way onto a social media site of the public account of the city council, so that's great. The transparency is moving forward, but I will not be happy until it's live streaming to multiple sites to engage the citizenry of this city and help drive more government transparency and get rid of the hearsay and rumors that float around town while driving civic engagement. It's very low cost. We can have closed captioning as well for people who need that. Yeah, so that's what I'd like to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Elizabeth Dunn.
Good evening, Elizabeth Dunn. I own property in Port Angeles and live in the county. I'm here to talk about two things, primarily the Compassion Charter. Wanted to voice my support for that, and I'm just so impressed and happy to see all the work that's being done in the community around that. So thank you, everyone who's been intimately involved in that. And I think the city has an important role to play here as a partner with the community in making a strong statement of compassion. And that's not to be underestimated, what the city can add by making that statement. So thank you for hopefully adopting that and for making that statement and standing along with the community. The other issue I wanted to briefly address is one that I think might be proposed as a late agenda item regarding off-street parking requirements. And I don't know too much about this yet, and it might be on future agendas, but I understand it to eliminate the minimum parking requirements for accessory residential units just in the code itself. I think building permits can still impose those requirements. I'm not sure if that came out of the new condo building that's proposed downtown or mixed-use building, concerns about parking for that or where that came from. But I would say that I'm all for more walkable cities and better public transportation. But you know, as being a county resident now, also being conscious of where to park and going downtown. And part of a sustainable community, a local community, is being able to patronize downtown stores and those businesses. And right now I see, I don't know the number, it looks to be about a 30% vacancy rate downtown with vacant stores. And I'd love to see efforts put into, I'm sure there's already ongoing efforts, but more efforts into filling those spaces and getting more people downtown. So just being conscious of that, if we're going to eliminate parking, how people are going to be able to access our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience who would like to speak to council at this time?
I'm Ingrid Carmine, and I live in the city. And I agree with Sherry Kidd, actually I wrote down Councilwoman Kidd, that we have many compassionate people in Port Angeles. I see them bringing food and clothes into Taffy every time I volunteer there. We should be proud of our compassionate community and state that we are a compassionate community. However, not everyone in Port Angeles is compassionate. I have often complained about those who threaten, who steal from, and destroy items of the homeless. We must adopt the Charter of Compassion so that we, as a community, as a city, show we believe in compassion towards everyone. I also know a little bit about the walkable city proposal. I can't express it, I don't know it that well, but I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, thank you. My name is Mary Doherty, and I was a child here, and then I went away for 50 years, and now I'm back because I love this place. I live in Port Angeles. I hear a lot every day about how people feel about things, about other people in our community. Compassion means to feel with, not necessarily to express feelings about. And I hear a lot of opinions about people who are less like whomever is speaking. And to feel with people would be a better goal as a compassionate community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
This is my first time. The very important thing I really want to talk about is Gordon Peters. I'm a resident. I was homeless here for 5 years, and I just recently got off the streets about 8 months ago now. And the main thing I really want to talk about is how people judge about homeless people being homeless, addicts, don't have nothing for their lives, bugging for people for money. Well, you guys don't understand about people who's homeless. They have stories about how they become homeless, what's going on with their lives. For 5 years, I've been getting judged about being an addict, homeless, stuff like that. And I don't really have a family that really cares about me. I've been here without a family. I've been doing everything on my own. And the one thing I really think is a place where homeless people could actually feel relaxed and calm, just like a shelter, but different during the day though. And I think that would actually open up people's hearts to understand people's story about their lives and where they come from and how they end up homeless. And I'm still getting judged once in a while, but I don't really let it get to me because I know better. I know where I came from. I know my story of my life. And people judge about PBH. I go there because I have mental issues. I have manic depression, PTSD, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. I committed suicide last year. I'm surprised I survived it. And I'm just really hoping you guys would actually open your guys' heart and have a place for homeless people have a place to relax instead of running around and try to relax on the beach or on the sidewalk or at the Bell or somewhere else. And that would actually open people's heart to understand what's going on with people. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon.
All right, anybody else? All right, so we're gonna move on to the agenda, and I guess, first thing we need to do is probably excuse, Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Dexter. She left because she was not feeling well.
So moved.
For a second? All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so it passes unanimously, she's been excused. Then we are on to late items.
I have one. If, with the consent of the council, I would like to propose an ordinance of the city of Port Angeles relating to off-street parking requirements for our first reading.
Okay, so, yes,
I'd like to comment on that.
sure.
I have 3 points I'd like to make in conjunction with the proposed late addition to the city council agenda. My first, and trust me, this has nothing to do with the verbiage in the ordinance, it's the way it's being presented. If you had gone to the website, city website, for the agenda for tonight's meeting, or picked up one of the agenda flyers from the door, nowhere would you see an advance notice about a first reading of a major change to the Port Angeles Municipal Code. If I were out there in the audience and this first reading of a major change in the municipal code came up and it was not on the agenda, I'd be asking myself what the heck is going on. I don't understand the motivation of using the late addition for adding such an important measure to the audience, to our agenda. In my opinion, I think the optics of doing this way are terrible. You talk about the need for transparency in government. There is a procedure for going through to add this type of discussion to our agenda, and when you circumvent that process, what you're in essence doing is cutting off transparency, in my opinion. So this is not transparent, it's far from it. Since this email about this late edition was received, I received it late Friday afternoon at about 3:30, which is basically the close of business for the week for the city. I'm sure staff has not had the opportunity to comment on it. What are the pluses and minuses from the point of view of the Public Works Department? What are the pluses and minuses from the point of view of the Parks and Recreation Department? What are the pluses and minuses from the point of view of the Community and Economic Development Department? Has the city attorney been checked with to make sure that there aren't state regulations that preclude us moving forward with doing this change? So there are some possible ramifications of this that need to be explored more completely. So point number 3 is, since the public had no, apparently some members of the public had, but that the public in general had no prior notification of this change in the Port Angeles Municipal Code, and in that it was going to be discussed tonight, I would make a motion that we do not add this to the agenda, and I would further make a motion that we table this, and I would like to see it sent to the Planning Commission, where it should have been in the first place, for their review and public comment. And so I'm asking that this issue be tabled for tonight's meeting.
I second that motion.
So we have a motion on the table to not put it on the agenda and to table this. So we need discussion on this.
Point of order, please.
Sorry.
Point of order.
Sorry. Okay.
When a motion to table is made, no There is no debate on that, so the only thing you can do now is call the question, please.
Okay, so we can call the question to table this item. All those in favor of the question, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, say no.
No.
So we got a 3 to 3, so I guess it does not pass. So it fails.
It fails.
So, yes.
So I have a couple issues with this. One of them, 17.94.070, right here. 14.40, where's that? It doesn't exist in here, and yet we're striking it completely. And number two, I've only been down this road before. I was under the understanding that it was council's position to ask staff and direct them. I didn't realize that it was council's job to write ordinances for them. And I just see that going down the same slope again, and I wouldn't be in favor of this, that this does not just cover ARUs. This covers section 14.40, which is all off-street parking, including for businesses. And when it was first presented and I read it, until I knew what 14.40 was, I assumed it just included ARUs, which is still an issue. You take a family that has multiple people in it, you put an ARU in the back of it, you only have one bedroom, well, you still have 2 people in one bedroom, there's another couple of cars. Until staff has an opportunity to weigh in on this ahead of time with their thoughts, and again, echoing Mr. Moran, I don't know what state regulations are involved in this or anything else, and to put this to a reading, I would never support without the support of staff behind it with their comments.
So can I make a suggestion here to council that we just add it as an item for discussion, no action, but for discussion under other considerations. And then we can have that longer discussion at that point. Just to discuss an idea that was brought up.
Is that a motion?
No,
No, she can't, she's
that's right, I'm just making a suggestion that we just add it to the agenda for discussion. And it's just an idea without any action.
Well, the chair has the power to add items to the agenda. I don't know that that power ends when the meeting starts. That's a procedural question that others may want to take up. In the meantime, we're wrestling with the bad policy that we have on having late items, which requires basically a majority of the council to vote to add a late item, which effectively is being used by the majority of the council to prevent discussion of a late item. My opinion on it is that there is a late item issue, although we have 2 readings. So there's time between this meeting and next meeting, if we approve this motion, to have a second reading and get input from everyone, including staff. My second opinion is that, if you were seeing a doctor and what the doctor was giving you was making you sick and dying, the doctor wouldn't say, let me study what else to give you while you continue to take that medicine. And, just keep taking that even though it's killing you, and then I'll figure out what else to do instead. No, we say, let's stop doing the bad thing and evaluate and figure out what else we need to do. I've been looking at these minimum parking ordinances since Mike introduced this over the weekend and over the last couple of days of the transit conference here. And it is bad medicine. We need to stop the minimum parking requirements. That doesn't mean that people can't build parking. It just means that we as a government are not requiring that. We're not requiring housing to incorporate the cost of parking. We're not requiring housing to incorporate the impervious surface of parking, which causes them to trigger the 2,000 square foot minimum size for stormwater regulation, some of which. So let's stop the bad medicine, move on with it, and then if the planning commission or if our city staff want to propose another kind of minimum parking requirement that might be more tailored between the all or nothing options that we have now, we can do that. But in the meantime, we need to stop this policy. So I support adding this as a first reading. Thank you.
May I speak?
So I guess, yeah, go ahead and speak.
So as the person that is trying to introduce a late item, I would like to just explain to the public some of the things that are happening. I am a council person elected by the citizens of Port Angeles to be part of the legislative branch of our government. The legislative branch of our government creates policy. We are the ones that make the laws, not the city staff. We do. I am one member of that council. I am not the mayor. I do not have access to the agenda. I have two ways to get items on the agenda. One is to go to the mayor in secret behind closed doors and say, please put this on the agenda. I did not like that option. I preferred to go to my council and say, which I think is the more polite way of doing it and the more collegial way of doing it, and say, please, can I add an item to the agenda? This is my only way of adding items to the agenda. So that's what I did, and other council members have seemed to take offense to that, and I did not intend any offense. With regards to the policy, we had a discussion in April, a long discussion about parking. It was wide-ranging, it talked about parking minimums. In preparation for that discussion, I did research on my own, looking through every single ordinance the city has ever passed on parking minimums dating back to 1966. So we considered that in April at a think tank for an hour. This is not a new idea. This is not something that is sprung as a trap. And all the concerns about transparency and discussion time are fixed by a first reading and a second reading, possibly a public hearing if we want. Those are all good things to discuss during the first reading. If we decide that ARUs really should have another parking spot, those are good things to talk about during a first reading. I have no problem with that. I think that my other council members often have good ideas, and I think by discussing our ideas together, we make better ideas. But the reason I brought this is actively preventing small businesses from expanding in our city right now. This is preventing big projects from using land in the best way possible and costing taxpayers more money when it comes to William Shore Memorial Pool's expansion. This is costing local small businesses that are trying to move and expand their business time that we shouldn't require every small business owner to have expertise in everything regarding the building process. It should be something that they don't have to go through the maze of city staff to find out exactly what they need. We have an inflexible code that says to the square footage what kind of parking requirements you need. We have a matrix in that section 14.40 that I really think if most of our citizens read it would blow their minds. It gets to granular detail. It uses shall language that gives staff very little flexibility. And it tells them from the government down, this is what you must do, private businesses. This is what you must do, private housing developers. You have no choice. We are making a law telling you what to do. I am coming at this from a free market perspective, saying the private market knows their lots best, it knows their needs best, and they can make those decisions. And if they make bad decisions, the market will punish them. If they put in a business that really should require parking and don't put any parking, no one will shop there and the problem is solved. Private developments have a vested interest in providing appropriate parking for their developments without the government telling them what they need to provide. And in many cases, what we tell them that they need to provide is far more than what they need to provide. So we had bad code that was started in the 1960s because people back then had bad ideas about how traffic worked. It's on our books now. It's preventing small businesses from expanding and building and revitalizing our areas. And I'm part of the legislative branch of government, and I feel the duty to do something. I have two ways to do it. I chose one. I'm sorry that it has caused this ruckus. I did not, I have a lot of notes on the process. I mean, I understand that this is not ideal, but this is how I get items on the agenda. And I understand that people might want this to go through the planning commission, and this is an ordinance that is fairly simple. It's basically two sections. I can read the whole thing right now. It's repealing one subsection of the municipal code in that 1794-070, and it's repealing one chapter of the municipal code.
Are we getting back to the first reading then?
Well, that's my point. Like, we kind of are, but those process concerns I recognize. I would not support a council member writing a really complex, nuanced new law. I'm not writing new law. I'm deleting bad law. And I would not support like a late item being introduced as
And I didn't in the past, to be clear. I didn't support that when it did come to us briefly. So I understand some concerns about this. I tried to distribute it as soon as I could. I'm a small business owner who's in tourist season and working very hard. I meant to call the PDN and try to get more public access to it, and I ran out of time. I did have an interview with KOP earlier today, so a lot of people did hear about it from that. I think that this is my job to represent small business owners in Port Angeles, and I'm doing what I think is right. So I apologize that other people have taken offense about this, but I really think that we have bad code and we should fix it.
Anybody else, business president, please?
Yes, this is the City of Port Angeles Council meeting agenda for August 20th, 2019. This is what's published, this is what you see, and this is not what has been presented tonight. Late items have just been called bad policy. Well, this is good policy because it's transparency. The Open Public Meetings Act holds our feet to the fire that we are accountable to the people of Port Angeles to be transparent. We don't make up new laws and decide to throw them in at the last minute, bypassing staff, bypassing council, bypassing the procedure. The Association of Washington Cities has training for us on how to do this legally. The Open Public Meetings Act insists that we do things open and transparent because that's what is expected for good government. Good government is a government that is transparent and has information available to the public of what we're going to act on in our council meeting. Also, RCW 35A.13.120 talks about interference by council members with staff. This has not been through staff. It has not been provided us by staff. It has not been through legal. We are bypassing staff, and that's what they wrote the interference by council members law for, so that we don't get carried away do this. When we're under the Washington Growth Management Act, and when we're making zone changes, there's a process. We must inform the Washington Department of Commerce. This doesn't do that. It doesn't inform the people of Port Angeles. It does impact the city manager. It causes actually disruption between staff and council when council takes over staff duties and we show up with our own ordinances. This is appropriately a discussion for the Planning Commission, and this must by law have public comment and review prior to action. There is no public transparency here. I ran for the office of City Council because I wanted to see more transparency on the City Council. We have improved, but this is a huge step backwards. The Open Public Meeting Act is established to ensure the public interest in open, accountable government and information for all. This lacks every smell test, so this is inappropriate, and I do object to being blindsided by a Friday night memo and somebody taking our council rules and procedures and saying this bad policy. It isn't. It's transparency. Transparency is good government, and I support good government. I do not support this or the way it's been handled.
Okay, folks, so we've got, it doesn't look like we have support to read this at this time. It failed to get completely not put on the agenda. It hasn't failed to get put on the agenda.
So let's move on.
This is Lindsay. I'd like to make a motion to add this ordinance to our next city council meeting for a first reading in a form approved by the city attorney.
Second.
Okay. So I guess we've got a motion on the table in a second. And this is for a future agenda, but we could actually avoid all this. And we can have the discussion of adding it on there. But now that we have a motion on the table, we have to discuss that.
Certainly, point of order. We are already voted to send this to the planning commission.
Yeah.
Now, we voted not to table this discussion, so you're putting it on the later part of the agenda for discussion. In my opinion, right now, it's a moot point because we've already had the discussion. I'd like to comment on the motion, if I might.
It's for the next agenda.
That's correct. Lindsay's motion was, as I understand it, to defer this to the next meeting in a format approved by the city council. And I will not be supporting that because I believe firmly that this needs to be thoroughly vetted. This is, again, I'm not objecting to talking about parking and its ramifications downtown. That's not my point. My point is the process needs to be adhered to. And the proper process, in my opinion, is for the public to have their comment at the planning commission level. The planning commission then can make a recommendation to us as to move forward on that. Then we can have a first reading and a second reading at the council level to change the ordinance. And so I will be voting no on this motion because I think it needs to start at the planning commission level. I think we're doing it, being disrespectful for the planning commission by bypassing them. They do excellent work in reviewing these type of things, and we need to involve them and the public in the preliminary discussions of a change to the municipal code as dramatic as this is, and therefore I will be voting no on this motion.
All right, anybody else would like to comment on this?
So I would say that I have no problem, if this were to pass at some level, I would have no problem with staff and the planning commission trying to find flexible rules that we could apply to our city. But I don't think deleting code requires going to the planning commission. I just don't. I think that we are in charge of our code. We are the legislative branch of government. And I just like to respond to something said in the past. I don't think I'm violating any laws. I don't think I'm violating our code of procedure or conduct. I'm using one of the two tools, I'm trying, to put items on our agenda. There's only two. So, a rhetorical question I ask the council is, why is there a late items section on every single agenda we post?
Exactly.
We had a discussion about this in April. We had a long, intense discussion about this in April. And I'm presenting it as a late item. I emailed it out on Friday. I emailed it out on Thursday to staff. I don't think that what I did was inappropriate. I think that I'm acting because I want to make sure local businesses can get certificates of occupancy.
All right, anybody else who would like to comment? Yes, go ahead.
So I don't disagree with Councilmember French. This goes from what we have now, which I'm not going to disagree is ridiculous. The amount of parking required for some of these businesses is completely off the chart. But I don't agree with the complete deletion of this item without staff input or without the planning commission input. But there is a definite need in this community to adjust the parking requirements and adjust those responsibly with the input from the public, the input from the planning commission, and the input from staff. As far as just completely getting rid of it, I think that's irresponsible. But I think also it's irresponsible to not deal with this issue and moving it forward to go to the planning commission and to go to staff is responsible in what we should be doing with it. My problem with passing this is that with doing this ordinance is accepting this without any of that. And I want to see us do it responsibly by having those folks weigh in on this. I realize that yes, free market will dictate whether or not people are going to park there, but I guarantee you there's always one in the bunch. There always will be. And that is important for staff to go over and the planning commission to go over to make sure that it's business friendly and at the same time responsible to neighboring businesses possibly that may be having their parking lot completely jammed up. So I'm not against this. I don't disagree with you, Mr. French. It's just I disagree with the process in which it's moving through. I would have no problem immediately saying, okay, we need to send this to the planning commission. That's not a problem, we need to have the staff input. I'd be fine with that today, but not with this the way it's written.
So the motion right now states,
Well,
let's,
this is Libby, may I comment? So in response to Councilmember Meredith, I think that the easiest way to get it to the planning commission, if that's a majority of the council's desire, is to pass the current, what we have is basically a proposal Adelaide item, which would then direct staff to bring forward this item at our next council meeting. We could then, at that next council meeting, someone could make a motion to send that to planning commission for review. But at least then we'd have a approved as to form version of this for sending to the planning commission. So I think voting yes for this or adding this as a late item helps to accomplish that goal if that is the majority of the council's desire.
So can I speak to a few things?
hang on, let me speak first, because I haven't had a chance to speak on this. So we have a motion on the table that says we're gonna add it to the following agenda. At which point, we could, as a council, decide to go ahead and forward it to the planning commission. And at that point, staff will get a chance to look at it, so we'll get some feedback from that. And things can get modified and changed, it'll be for discussion. So if we can have it, as an item at the next council, we can have this big discussion at that time with the documents in place, because the motion includes that it's gonna have legal review. And so, I think that would be appropriate.
So I appreciate what Councilmember Meredith said. I think he made a lot of good points, and I've thought about that a lot. One of the things that was on my mind first and foremost about this was, and I mean, in our current agenda, at the very end in council manager reports, we have a semi-annual updated strategic plan. So we've talked about staff time a lot as a council, and I think that, hopefully, I really hope staff understands that I have a lot of respect for the work they do, and I'm not interested in interfering. I think that in the year and a half or so I've been a council member, I've done a very good job in not interfering with staff work, and trying and staying in my lane as a policymaker. We see in the strategic plan review that, we have an ambitious strategic plan. It requires a lot of staff time. Some projects are doing great and on track. Others are delayed, or others are deprioritized and new prioritized. And it's I think a really great update that we got of the strategic plan, and I think a lot of amazing work has been done. But I don't want to throw a wrench into it. That was one of my primary things. Is I see a problem in our code that is creating problems for local businesses that are trying to expand. And I don't want to then say, okay, staff, you have to throw everything out the window that you're working on that we've all agreed as a council that they should be working on, and just do this. I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't direct staff. I shouldn't put more work onto their plate. And I really see this as a way that we can do our job without burdening staff. And by the way, the end result of this is, I think, a lot more freed up staff time, especially at the planning desk, because I think they spend a lot of time on a daily basis talking about parking requirements with people that are trying to apply for building permits. That's just my sense. I don't have any necessarily inside information on that or anything, but I didn't want to throw a bunch of work at staff. I think that's a bad idea, and if we do decide to go that way, I won't support that, and I'll find a different way to find the policy goals that I need to achieve. And when it comes to deleting the whole chapter is saying we have minimum parking requirements. The policy that I want to get rid of is having minimum parking requirements. So deleting the whole chapter is actually, I think, the best way to do that. I actually looked through that chapter very closely and tried to say, we can make some surgical changes to this and delete this whole subsection. And really, I think that that's inappropriate work for council members to do on their own, to go into each individual little part and see what they can wordsmith. I really don't think that I'm equipped to do that as a layperson. And so I really think that, I'm supposed to, my policy work that I'm supposed to be doing is not granular, it's supposed to be big picture. Big picture, the idea was parking minimums are a bad idea. That whole section or chapter, I can't remember what it's called, is saying we should have parking minimums. I'm deleting the whole chapter. I think that I'm in my lane doing the big picture policy work I'm supposed to be doing, and that's why I decided to recommend deleting the whole chapter in the ordinance.
Just one last point. according to my understanding of what the proposal is, this thing is going to wind up in the planning commission anyway. Because if it goes to the meeting next week, we have the option, or next meeting, we have the option of then sending it down to the planning commission. If we're going to send it to the planning commission, why not just send it to the planning commission now and get it, and move it along? I mean, Mike must have felt that there was some sense of urgency that he had to put it on the late item, but rather, you know, I get the whole idea about the ways of getting things on the agenda, but still, there's a process, and I don't understand why we need to move it one meeting forward and then vote on it then to go to the planning commission. Why can't we vote on it right now and send it to the planning commission if that's what we want to do? I don't understand what this intermediate step that Lindsay's suggesting, so that's why I'm going to, again, vote no and
It's a motion
end of
so
story.
that we can discuss this.
Just very quickly, I guess I'm confused, why can't we just throw this away, put it on the agenda to talk about it, but not this, but just parking, and send it to the planning commission to have them do that, but being that this is an all or nothing sort of item, I don't know why it wasn't really just added as a late item, we need to deal with parking, we need to change that, we'd like to talk to the planning commission about that, versus this particular method of doing it, and I'd be in support of that, but.
So I guess to answer that, I think the right way to do that in my mind is to delete the section and then put it in the normal priority order that staff and council decides that it should be in. So I don't want to jump the line, that's my point. So to tell staff this is a priority now, I think is disrespectful to the strategic plan and to their work. So the way to get it in the right place in line, because how does it rank against all the other things that we've directed that were, that are on the planning commission has its own work plan. I don't think that I should be able to tell them what their work plan should be as a single council person. I don't want, like I said, I don't want to jump the line. I think the right way to do that would be, like I said, to delete that section. That's because I think we should delete it, and then that can go in okay, where in their work plan do they think we need to talk about parking? And then we can have flexible rules. But I don't think there's really damage to be done in the meantime, because I think these are just bad ideas. And I would just point out, many cities have had this conversation, many cities have deleted minimum parking requirements, and they have not seen an Armageddon. They have not seen catastrophic results.
Let's move forward. Any more comments? We have a motion on the table to add this to the next council meeting, and it'll go through legal review. So, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so it's 3-3, that doesn't pass. So I guess this item is dead.
Sure.
All right, so let's move on with the agenda. And council, I would like to move the compassion charter presentation up before we take on any more items. Is that okay? All right, so let's begin with the compassion charter presentation by Marilyn Ash.
Here, it looks like needs a little help. I think it's been sitting here for a long time. So while she's fixing that for me, my name is Marilyn Esch, and I've lived here for 38 years. And I must say, I really feel it's a privilege to live here. And that is why I've been basically dedicated to trying to make this community increasingly better. So, compassion lives here. And so maybe we could all just take a deep breath. We had, quite a discussion going on there. It may not have felt real compassionate, but they're just trying to do their job, right? Deep breath, yeah. So compassion does live here, and we see and experience it every day.
At the May 4th Compassion Town Hall that we had at college, we had over 40 groups inspire us with wonderful services for our youth, our elders, new families, vulnerable populations. We see it in the hundreds of thousands of volunteer hours that are done here every year. And we saw it with Mike French and Nathan West when they went out in the winter, stayed out overnight, so that they could try to understand more deeply what it might be like to not have a place to call home. And so thank you both for doing that. So why does Port Angeles need a charter for compassion? Why now? What's different? We live in a really complex, challenging, and often polarized world. There's a divisive incivility that we are seeing in our public leaders. Not all of them, just some. And in some of the settings. And this is not the model that we want for Port Angeles. And it's not the model that we want for our young people. We can give our young people and all of our community a dynamic and resilient model of how to be good citizens. We all need an additional compass to help navigate some of these new situations that we may not have faced before. And compassion can be that compass. It can also be one of the metrics that we use when deciding policies and procedures and when we're trying to untangle complex situations. When we declare and hold ourselves accountable to the best we can be and the best we can do, and then share those stories, and that's the really important part. We cultivate more of what we want. The stories that we tell ourselves create the lens through which we see. And when we look through the lens of compassion, all of the 20,000 people that live here in Port Angeles and the 2 to 3 million annual visitors that we get coming through the Olympic National Park feel welcome. So, when we change the story, we change the future. And that's really what the Charter of Compassion is about. It's people collectively deciding on issues that need attention. It's citizens working together with elected leaders and all of the different sectors within our community. And it's local compassion teams forming networks of partners that are involved in creating these new processes and stories. So today we're going to focus on 3 things. The first is, what do we mean by compassion? What is the role of the city in this process? And that's where we'll spend most of the time. And where do we fit within the larger network called the Charter for Compassion? So we're going to use the definition that was supplied by the Compassion Integrity Training, which actually comes out of the university. And it is the desire to address the needs of another, grounded in the care for their well-being. There are basic skills that can be taught and developed. There's even curriculum that is available now for K through 12. So the first is noticing another's needs and fostering the skill of listening to the underlying message. As you've noticed, until people feel like they've been heard, they keep repeating, and sometimes it happens in a higher volume. So the second is empathic concern for them. It's really important that your constituents feel and know that you care about them. And the third thing is feeling empowered to act skillfully and meaningfully. It requires critical thinking, discernment, and looking at real solutions. Compassion calls both your heart, but also calls your head and your hands. And when Mike and Nathan went out and braved the cold out there, and then they partnered with the PDN who reported it, there were whole sections of our community that learned things that they really didn't even know that they didn't know. So I know that there is some question in what is the community what's the city's role in this? So first I'm going to talk about what the Compassion Coalition would continue doing that the city wouldn't have to do unless you just got excited and wanted to join into that part. So the Compassion Coalition will continue to host events, provide education and training, support compassion action networks and projects, and we would also be the ones that would maintain the link with the charterforcompassion.org and, when appropriate, bring these resources to Port Angeles. If there was somebody at the city level, for instance, that wanted to talk about parking issues with other cities that had already successfully handled that, we could easily arrange those kind of video conferencing. So the city's part, I handed out another handout. The city's part actually is about policy, systems, and environmental change. And this handout was given to us by Monica Dixon, who is in charge of the 5210 program. And let's see. So that handout is very self-explanatory, but it's focused on how communities can support change in health. So as we go through the charter, I'll be talking about how a city can help support compassionate policies, systems, and environmental change. Okay? And we did actually edit some more on the charter for Port Angeles, not for Palm County, the charter for Port Angeles, taking into account some of the things, some of the concerns that you had mentioned. Okay, so the first line is we, the City Council, on behalf of the residents and citizens of Port Angeles, declare our shared commitment to embrace compassion as a value that we will intentionally build into the culture of our community. So how do we do that? Many organizations start with their vision or mission statement. And as we see here, this was posted on the PAPD's Facebook, where they already have compassion in their mission statement. So of course, we aren't going to know how to implement this, all of that, every day, every time, every situation. But by declaring the intent, it brings us back to the table again and again and again to figure out how to improve the outcome the next time. Another way that we build culture, and this is part of the city's part, is through example and through celebrations. Lacey, Washington, the city of Lacey, Washington, challenged their community, their school district, and their Chamber of Commerce to do 100,000 acts of compassion between January and June this year. And when they finished that, in 5 months, they had a big celebration. Great community building and a great thing for the community to do. By affirming this charter of compassion, next line, we agree to use compassionate awareness as we upgrade, including parking, update, create, and sustain policies and activities. So PAPD are beginning to implement that with community policing, which really focuses on establishing relationship. So when there is an issue, there's something that they can draw on. And also the partnership with the Rediscovery Program, which as far as I can tell, is working really well with the marginalized community. Pomona, California was having their city council actually got along really well, but the community comment was really a problem. And they were going over their time, they were yelling, they were interrupting each other, similar to a situation we saw locally, but not in Port Angeles. So they got proactive and they came up with a standard or guideline. And by creating these boundaries within both their city council meetings, their planning commissions, and any other public meeting, what they found is that people actually adhered to them. And they said, I talked to some of them, they said it really changed the creativity and innovative solutions that they could come up with during their meeting time. Another part is we invite organizations, businesses, schools, and individuals and clubs and community groups to join us in upholding compassion as a primary value. So a way a city could be involved in that is having quarterly or annual celebrations or an award for compassionate action, either at a business level, an organizational level, or an individual level. Right now, two of our biggest employers, Peninsula College and OMC, already have compassion as one of their values or very active in their training. And as we know, most of our stores here donate to the food banks. What we want to do is keep that momentum going, and that can be part of the city's role. Okay? In partnership with other organizations, we will develop and expand our skills in compassion application, critical thinking, and discernment. And we know that this is not something that happens overnight. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So we put some sentences right into the charter that we would sign that says, we recognize that these skills will take time to be developed and implemented. It's a lifelong endeavor that will be expanded community-wide through training, sharing personal experiences, services, and activities. So a compassionate community is not a comfortable one, but one that can recognize when and where there are issues and act heartfully and deliberately to address problems. When our organizations and actions are rooted in compassion, our community becomes resilient and thrives. Compassion can help us engage complex situations with innovative solutions and confidently navigate changes in society, economy, and the environment. So an example currently here that of a complex issue of food insecurity that was identified as a priority at our town hall. The way that we're moving forward with that is that we had an informal meeting of several of the people that are involved in food systems, from farmers, the food bank, WSU, the gardeners and gleaners, and social service and healthcare. And together we decided to focus on the gap that happens when the food banks are closed and there are no community meals. And this little picture here of the free little pantry is something that we decided actually was very low barrier, easy access, very low cost. And it's a program that's being done throughout the country very successfully, where it's neighbors, helping neighbors, volunteers, create the pantries, they build them, they host them, they stock them. And when I talked to the person that began this program in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where they have 50 of these in neighborhoods, she said the typical person that comes to them is a single mom after work. And that they are sharing way more than food. What they're actually sharing is camaraderie and compassion. So there's some more to our Charter for our Compassion, but I think this is the most important part. We resolve to embrace compassion as a key value and support the exploration and development of policies and activities to integrate compassion into the daily life of our community. This is what the city can do. This is what we're asking you to do, is declare a commitment, agree to use compassion, encourage community groups, develop and expand skills, enhance compassion, and integrate compassion into the daily life of our community. You can't legislate compassion, but you can lead, support, and partner. Increasingly, let us be the community that we want to give to our future generations. There's something called occupying space. And if we let the polarized, divisive model be what comes into Port Angeles, we've really made a mistake. So it's our job to occupy that space with a dynamic model of how we want our young people and the rest of the community to interact with citizens. So we're just going to show a couple of minutes of this, and then there'll be a couple of minutes for questions. Hit the little thing. Right.
I live in the city of Pune. What I love about Pune is that it's a city that has art, it's got music and theater and everything, and it makes it a very wholesome and complete city.
Rotterdam is the second city of the Netherlands. It's all about buildings and building.
Las Vegas is actually an extraordinary place to live. What most people don't appreciate is that behind those images, there is a very compassionate heart.
Sacramento is the capital of California. They have really promoting artists right now, and so a lot of new murals are going up, which is really making the energy of the city a lot more dynamic.
About 40% of the population of Pune city lives in slums. The second thing I would say is the issue of education, making education even better than what it is today. The challenge is very big, growing city is what Pune is also facing.
We have a very poor educational outcome in terms of students graduating.
Literacy levels that are very high in some areas, very low in others. So ensuring that our education system is reaching everyone.
25% of children grow up in poverty in Rotterdam. In my opinion, that's a huge amount.
So Las Vegas has its dark side, as any city does, and among those areas is our children. So 1 out of 10 of our teenagers attempt suicide.
Well, I think one of the top issues is homelessness in the city. The poor, poverty, is an issue that exists in a major city like Dallas.
Homelessness and poverty, and I know that's true for so many cities, but poverty is huge. 1 in 4 or 5 children are hungry and in poverty, living in poverty, and it's just not acceptable.
Inequality is growing in Australia. That is an issue. Environmental issues becomes as well.
In Australia, every 5 days a woman is killed, generally by their partner. And interestingly, every day 6 people kill themselves, 5 of them are men.
Everything the world needs is there. You have the technology, you've got the people, you've got the money, you have volunteers, you have everything, and yet the world is not working. And I think the missing piece, the missing glue is compassion.
You could draw a line from Sandy Hook to Columbine to a number of different mass shootings here in America. And you can also ask the question why, and the answer seems to be low emotional intelligence. So compassion is really the curriculum for increasing emotional intelligence.
If humanity wants to save the world, I think the only path to reach that is the path of compassion. I'm so convinced about that.
We live in a time right now that's not very kind, but I think there's a lot of kind people out there, and we need to support and celebrate goodness and kindness. So we're just kind of changing the focus. But it has.
So You get the gist. There are 440 compassionate communities throughout the world. We've already signed up, our Compassion Coalition has already signed up just as a beginning initiative. So what we are asking is that the City Council, it sounds like next week's the next agenda's gonna be pretty full, to put it on their agenda to vote on, and then also, in the meantime, if you have questions, you can contact me or somebody else that's on the committee and really think about it and take a look and see what other communities are doing. So, do we have a couple of minutes for questions? Is that?
Is there any, this council, is there any questions from council at all? So I guess I would have one question saying, you know, as all these cities have joined, you know, what is the, you know, what's the process that they normally go? Is it a similar process for everybody?
So every city is unique. One of the things about the network of the Charter for Compassion is that it's a network of networks. It's not a hierarchical organization, there's no authority. So it's very focused locally. And some cities, like Salt Lake, and also like Lacey, the city council actually took the lead and then gathered partner organizations. Other ones, very much like ours, there's been a group of people who have decided that this is something they wanted to bring into their community. And so the city council just signs a resolution. Whether or not they sign that resolution, the group is going to go forward. The difference is the city can add a level of policy making that, you know, when you review the PSC handout they gave you, which I hope you will, there's really specific instances where the city can do policies and procedures that can support an initiative.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions?
I'm just really interested in doing what we can to support this, citizen-led movement that they come to us to present, and I really appreciate what they've done, and I would love to see the sign.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And, all right. So it's 7.
So this is
sorry.
Libby. I just wanted to share for the other council members that when this was first brought to the council, I expressed a number of concerns back, and those were received and discussed and incorporated. And so if any other council members have hesitation about this adopting at a future date, please do bring it back to either Marilyn or other people in the Compassion Campaign Group and voice your concerns. Don't sit there and hold them inside. Thank you.
And I just wanted to make a comment to Lindsay. It was quite a process that we had going, dialoguing back and forth. And it came out better. So if you see something that you think might need to be edited a little bit, or I know cities like to do a lot of whereases, if you need to put in a whereas or something, please feel free. It's just that the intention is that we want to bring compassion here as a core value, bring it into our practices, policies, and procedures. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. So, council, do we need a break, or are we ready to continue on? I guess we'll continue on. Okay, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Anybody have any items for the consent agenda of concern? No. So let me read the consent agenda. The City Council minutes for August 6, 2019, expenditure report from July 27, 2019 to August 9, 2019 in the amount of $1,664,595.31. Wastewater utility updates to the municipal code, and the 2019 pole testing contract.
I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes unanimously. All right, so
So on to the for-hire licensing code. And Mr. Ford?
Thank you. This is the second reading of the revised draft of this proposed code. The first reading, there were two suggested changes. Those changes have been made in this draft of the ordinance, and the changes are actually shown in the draft. And so this is the draft that contains all of the changes that we had at that time. Since then, we have sent this out to the taxi companies who set it up in both Uber and Lyft. Uber has written today, got no suggestions, no comment back from any of the taxi companies. And today, I think all the city council received a letter, rather short letter from Lyft, in which they had two changes. The basic change was to ensure that a driver in their network could either own a vehicle or lease a vehicle, which was apparently important to them. And that was really the substance of the change. I have no problem with anything else was. Apart from that, this is basically the same ordinance that was considered at first reading. It is based on a number of Washington cities' ordinances, has essentially the same language, same provisions, and it's, again, we consulted a bunch of ordinances in preparing this, Bellingham, Pasco, Poland, Richmond, Spokane, Colma, Yakima, Vancouver. They're all within the last 3 years and pretty similar, not identical, but similar provisions. And so that's, I don't have anything more to add about that. If you have a question, of course, I can let you address it.
Okay, council, anybody have any questions?
This is Lindsay with a question for Attorney Bloor. Is the city clerk fees $50 per year, is that the fee per driver or per for-hire vehicle business? Meaning, like, for example, Lyft only needs to apply for one fee, or does every Lyft driver need to apply?
That's the fee paid by the business. And it's, this fee paid by the business, and it's toward the lower end of the scale of the cities I just mentioned.
Just to clarify, so is the business the for-hire vehicle company, like Lyft, or is it the driver, like the Lyft driver?
Per company.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm still not sure if that actually clarified my question. So the TNC would be, for example, Lyft would get the for-hire vehicle business as opposed to the driver.
Yes, the driver.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just take her purse. And, okay, any other question for this?
So I would just like to say I don't have any problem with the changes that Lyft suggested. I think we should adopt them. I think they're fine. To respond to a comment from the public in addition to an email, I think that yes, we might be making changes that don't matter in the long term if, you know, transportation network companies go the way of Napster or whatever. Because, you know, my business did make over $2 billion more profit than Uber last year because I didn't lose $2 billion. But, you know, I think that we're not trying to craft a perfect ordinance, we're just trying to craft an interpretable ordinance that works for the needs now. You might have to do work later. But I think that the changes are fine. I think we should adopt it. We should incorporate them. And so I would move that we adopt the ordinance with the changes suggested by, the revisions suggested by Lyft.
I would second that.
So we have a motion on the table to adopt the changes in the ordinance as stated.
any other further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? So it passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to the RPW local 997 union contract.
Doing the budget amendment?
What
Oh,
about
I'm sorry,
G2?
I went to the wrong number two. Number two, 2019 budget amendment.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we do have the second reading to the second amendment for the 2019 budget. This amendment is again primarily comprised of capital projects that are included to align the budget with the newly adopted capital facilities plan. And there is also some parts to this amendment that includes updates of personnel line items for the collective bargaining agreements that have been settled to date. So this is the second reading, and we are recommending adoption at this time. And I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Council, is there any questions?
And in the memo, it says there's no change between the first and second reading, that's still true.
That is correct, there are no changes.
So let me read the ordinance. An ordinance of the city of Port Angeles, Washington, amending the 2019 budget and funds.
I move to adopt the ordinance as read.
Second.
Right, any further discussion? So I guess we're going to open up the second reading, so, okay. So we've got a motion on the table and a second, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the ordinance passes. Okay. Now, we go to other considerations, the IBW local 997 union contract.
Excuse me, good evening. So tonight I'm presenting to you the IBW local 997 union contract. You have outlined in your memo basically the terms of the contract, and just to highlight a few of the things, we are looking at a 4-year contract. And it includes cost of living adjustments for all classifications, market adjustments for classifications, increase in deferred comp matches, also a vacation accrual restructure, and also an increase in comp time. But one of the things I want to call your attention to in the memo is that, the city and the union believe that this contract is that a 4-year contract is going to help us attract new employees and retain our current employees. Right now, specifically the electrical utility is a very competitive market. I mean, Washington and California electrical companies can offer wages and benefits that are way above what the city can offer. Even, PUDs are offering higher wages and benefits than what we can offer, so it's very competitive. And we believe that this contract will keep us competitive and keep us up to speed. And so that's why you see a 4-year contract. I think that's great, a 4-year contract. But also the cost of livings and the market adjustments that are included in this contract. And so with that, and I'd also like to mention that we do currently have vacancies in this department, specifically with our linemen, which is where that competitive market comes into play. And we want to retain the employees that we have, but not only just the line workers, but also our fleet mechanics and conservation. I mean, these are the guys that are keeping our lights on. These are the guys fixing up our fleet when often called out in the middle of the night, and also working on conservation efforts. So with that, do you have any questions?
All right, Council, any questions? So I guess my only comment to you is thank you so much, because I know how hard it is to take this contract, and it's really wonderful to have a 4-year contract. I think the work from staff is just amazing, so thank you.
I guess, I will say the motion. I move that we approve the terms of the IBW local number 997 union contract as outlined in the memo.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
And then I'll say, I appreciate the negotiation partners on both sides. I know that this is a difficult process where we have to balance the ability for our ratepayers to afford rate increases against, having a competitive compensation for our employees who are very valuable. And I know that the citizens of Port Angeles very much appreciated the IBW local 997 during our windstorm and our winter storms over this last season. And so I think this was a really well-designed contract on both sides, and I appreciate all the effort that was put into it.
I'd like to add that by having the staff to maintain our electrical system and keep it up well, when we have emergencies like the windstorm, we're able to get it back online faster than if we were deferring maintenance on our electrical system, not having the capacity to keep it up. So that staff played a critical role in that, and I want to thank the linemen for that work. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, so we got a motion on the table and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, contracting and purchasing, the 2019 power line tree trip.
Madam Mayor and Council, I want to take that item this evening. We had an unexpected family emergency for our Public Works Director. At this point, I will go ahead and do that. I do want to emphasize the importance, and particularly when you look at the activity that we saw this past winter relative to storm activity, it's extremely important that we're consistently maintaining trees that are adjacent or abutting our power line system, making sure that we have taken care of those in advance of the storm. It's really a proactive way to treat the situation, making sure that all of our ratepayers are taken care of, and ultimately we have very few outages in the future. And I think that's something that certainly the city and Light Operations takes great pride in, is the limited number of outages that we have, and part of that is proactively maintaining and caring for the trees along our line system. I will also note something that wasn't incorporated in the memo that I know is very meaningful to council. The payment that we make towards this contract actually also allows us to become Tree City USA, which I know is also important to council, and that spending that we do ultimately cares for trees in the long run. It ensures proper practices, not chopping trees, but ultimately it results in good care and allows us to do even more care in the future.
Thank you. Yes.
I move that to approve and authorize the city manager to sign a contract with a Splendid Tree Expert Company for 2019 tree trimming, contract CON-2019-26, at the rate of $211.40 an hour in an amount not to exceed $125,000, and to make minor modifications to the agreement if necessary.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the table and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, the next item is the 2019 underground cable replacement.
And Madam Mayor and Council, I will also take this item this evening. This is for 2019 underground cable replacement. This is something that was actually incorporated in the capital facilities plan approved by council earlier this year. Incorporated in the capital budget was $200,000. We did see bids come in underneath that budget amount. Total bid came in at $151,105 before taxes. And at this point, we are recommending that council approve and authorize the city manager to sign a contract with Titan Electric of Casper, Wyoming, in the amount of $151,105.65, including tax, for the underground cable replacement project CL0219, to make minor modifications as necessary.
So moved.
Second.
We read it.
All right, so I suspect that's a motion then. Okay, so we have a motion on the table to approve and authorize the city manager to sign this contract. And we have a second. Any further discussion from anybody? Well, this is one of those things that I know we spend money on, but the maintenance of our infrastructure is critical. And we have got to continue to do this. So I want to thank staff, and I'm grateful to see, these repairs, as long as we can get ahead of it, so we don't have any major outages. So thank you. All right. We have a motion on the table in a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, so with that, we will go to council reports. Lindsay, would you like to start us off?
Sure, I'm coming back from the Washington State Transit Association, which is the conference of all public transit agencies throughout Washington. I got to tour the light rail maintenance yard for Sound Transit, which was pretty cool to see, like the details of how the operation works, their control room, stuff like that. And then also look at some advances or experiments in what in transit jargon is referred to as first mile, last mile. How do people get from the transit stop to their actual destination, or from their starting point, their house or wherever, to the transit stop? That's the first mile, last mile issue. So people in Tacoma and King County and other places have been experimenting with ways to address that and trying to figure out what can be cost effective. Also a lot of networking and looking at how to do diversity and inclusion and equity work within transit. And there's often a challenge with transit development into neighborhoods that are at a threat of gentrification. So there were a number of speakers addressing some of those issues as well. So it was really a good conference to be at. It was part of my council duty via Collin Transit Board assignment. So that's why I was here. That's all I have to share today. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Kidd.
Every day I drive down the street past the work going on the William Shore Memorial Pool and wave and blow them kisses, and and applaud. It's so exciting, just every day, drive down the street and see the activity and look at the picture in front and visualize. So we'll be having tours of the project as soon as we get a little further along. It's quit digging and tearing down and tearing up cement. There'll be tours available to see how the project. So keep in touch, and hopefully pretty soon we'll be able to take you on a tour and show you what the next 50 years of swimming is going to look like in Port Angeles, Washington. I'm really proud of our community.
A busy week taking my daughter to college, and she's going to Maine. And it seems like just a traveling trip. But the interesting thing is, before being on council, I wouldn't have thought anything of these different cities, and that's just another place. After being up here, you really start to realize a lot of the other kind of hidden things within the cities, whether it's their painted sidewalks or the way their brick sidewalks are laid in versus the way ours are laid in, and it's kind of an eye-opener to just the variety of way other places do things and how they run their cities. And it's the stuff that I think, before we were just taken for granted. We walked right past it and wouldn't give it a second thought. The history and the age of things. She happens to be going to school in Castine, Maine, which has a big sign there, settled in 1620. And I gotta tell you, some of it looks like that. It's amazing the amount of work that they've put into these buildings to upkeep them and to maintain the history of these things. And same, we went to Salem and looked at all that, and those gravestones that are, there's a gravestone in there that was somebody that passed away that was one of the pilgrims. And it was great to see that, and good luck to her, and I tell you, I'm glad to be home, because I think the statement, you need a vacation from your vacation, is true.
Okay, I did attend a Port Angeles Downtown Association meeting. They had a new office space. That was nice to see, reducing overhead costs and having a nice new space. I can't honestly remember everything we talked about. I know we talked about parking. I did also attend the Homelessness Task Force. We have an executive committee, which I'm on, that we're meeting regularly to discuss our required update to the 5-year plan to end homelessness for Collin County. And so we had a really good conversation about what our goals are, whether we should be realistic or dream big, and that's a tough one because just the name of the plan already is kind of dreaming big, the 5-year plan to end homelessness. But we talked a lot about what permanent supportive housing is and what it isn't. I know that's been in the news recently regarding the Tempest house that Serenity House oversaw, that, you know, that was categorized as permanent supportive housing, and I'm not sure it really met the definitions just based on what kind of support their clients were getting, and, you know, due to understandable funding issues. But, so we had a discussion about that. We talked about, you know, what our goals for coordinated intake should be, recognizing there's being Square and Port Angeles in the West End. You know, they are unique places with different needs, and so probably should have different goals for them. But it's been really great to work on that committee, work with the County Health and Human Services staff. So that's ongoing. I think that's pretty much it. I honestly did prepare a lot for the council report, and I probably attended one or two other meetings that I remember as well.
Jim.
Just three quick things. First of all, just on a self-serving note, I attended a pre-production meeting for the broadcast schedule for Port Angeles High School sports. We will be broadcasting live TV, not only football this season, but also we're going to include girls volleyball. So we're going to do 4 matches, I think they're called. I don't know much about volleyball, but I'm going to learn. So anyway, Port Angeles High School is going to be broadcasting live, and Bill Wicken and I will be the commentators for not only football, but we're including volleyball and the boys and girls basketball for this season. So I'm really excited about that. You'll be able to see it on the Port Angeles High School website, and also go to youtube.com and type in Port Angeles High School, and you can watch the game live. And and hear the dulcet tones of me. So anyway, second thing I attended was, along with Manager West, we attended an Opportunity Zone roundtable with Scott Turner, Executive Director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council. That's quite a title. And so we had a tremendous roundtable meeting, and it included a lot of stakeholders, tribes, financial institutions, the EDCs, and communities, which included Port Angeles and Forks and Port Townsend and Swim at this meeting. And it was really the federal government communicating with the opportunity zones here, and I won't go into the description of what they are because it's a rather lengthy process. But anyway, it was very encouraging, but what we really need to see to start this program is some success stories. We have about 40 different projects that can be applied to the Opportunity Zone. One of them is would be a new hangar at the airfield, and that would qualify as an Opportunity Zone. And Jeff up there is looking to start a pilot training program for jet pilots. So, and that would fall in the Opportunity Zone. So that was really exciting. And then last Friday, Councilman Kidd and I attended the Mutual Self-Help Housing Education Program for Peninsula Housing Authority. 6 new families that have just completed building their own homes were given the opportunity to move in. A couple of finishing touches needed to be added, but it was, I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to see the looks on these people's faces when they actually they put in over 1,300 hours in a year's time to build their own home. You know, we have builders that don't want to build homes here in Port Angeles. Well, here's an opportunity to let people build their own homes. And Annie O'Rourke told me that they now have financing for 10 additional homes right down the street. And so here's a thriving project where people have a sense of ownership. They can move in, and they already their sweat equity can turn immediately into money. The average, Jerry, the average was about the day they signed the mortgage agreement. The average equity in their home is about $70,000. So they move in, and they've already Charlie, is that right? About $70,000. Charlie was there also, and so you know, for a year's worth of work, they have about $70,000 worth of equity in their home. And so this is just a tremendous program that I think garners our tremendous support, and it is just a thrill to watch these people take ownership of a home they literally built, and then very nice homes up on West 11th Street. So anyway, thank you.
So I, along with Jim, went to the senior center, and I was gonna try to get to his table, but I got
Stole my
way
customers.
I got waylaid on my way there by, especially by this one gentleman who was just really needing to talk. And so I finally pulled up a chair, and then we had another woman come in, and then, so, but there was a lot of healthy discussion. And one newcomer asked, why is our water linked, irrevocably linked with the trash? Because he felt like he did not make enough trash to really make it worthwhile, and he couldn't deny trash service when he wanted to just water. So he was told that they needed to be together. And then another woman said, the newspaper does a really great job of saying what's on the agenda for us, but it doesn't do, like, in the same kind of very quick bullet points, what happened. Apparently she feels like there's folks who don't really know what ends up happening here. There's long stories, she goes, but we don't get to even read the story. The other idea was potentially there's folks who come, who work all day and are having dinner and dealing with family in the evening and I can't make it here. So can we change the city council meetings, having one in the evening and do one during workdays? That was another suggestion. So anyway, I'm passing on the ideas of what was mentioned. The next thing I want to talk about is the water story. So the story of water of Dungeness watershed is being put together by the League of Women Voters. They are going to be doing the same story here for us in Port Angeles, but so this one is being shown at the City Council chambers at 6:30 October 23rd, and that'll be how our water systems work and hydrology in the Dungeness watershed. So it's, I think it's the work that's being done by the League of Women Voters for us to understand the water issues. I think it's really, really important. So I'm looking forward to the efforts that happen here locally. Let's see, during my time at the senior center, I joined the senior center. Finally, I've been wanting to do that. The Green Link, so we had the meeting of Green Link. They are here, they're helping us look at all our street corridors and what would be the best way to do it, so we got some further input. They have been out at the farmer's market getting input from people, so if you see anything that deals with the creeks and watershed, please go ahead and give them your opinion. They're really looking for everybody's opinion on, how people use it and what they would like to see there. I also met the new tribal liaison for the college. Her name was Yolanda, so I'm hoping that we continue to make those links throughout all our organizations. So she's new in town. Then one of my committee assignments is the MRC, and they had their summer interns present yesterday. There's 4 of them, so every year the MRC is the Marine Resource Conservation Committee, Marine Resource Committee, and they hire 4 interns during the summer, and they're usually helping with crab outreach because there's a lot of crab pots that get lost, and so teaching them that. There's also some of our interns go out and measure where the kelp bend edges are, or the pigeon guillemot counts of birds. And so it's really interesting to see these young folks go out there and then they come back and they do a presentation for the public. So that presentation was yesterday. And then we had a climate action meeting, and that was also a really good discussion as to how we continue to try to move forward with climate change. And I know one of the ideas was to have the Planning Commission actually be involved. Ben Stanley for the Planning Commission was there, and so there was a couple of suggestions being thrown out there on how to do that. So we're still working through that, but it makes sense that potentially the Planning Commission, who will be reviewing some of the comprehensive plan updates regarding climate change, would do that. But they mentioned that that was, like I said, that was just an idea thrown out there. And I guess that's it. So that is my report. So, City Manager.
Madam Mayor and Council, I have a number of items for you. I'm going to start out with the City Council meeting schedule for the year, and that's something that we're passing out tonight, an update. We had some last minute changes to do to that, and so it didn't make it out with the packet. I apologize for that, but as you know, we did to you, try to get it to you at least once a month with some updates. A couple changes I want to highlight there. One, we have moved the August 27th work session that was going to be about vacant properties, and that now is an August 27th cost of service assessment for the electric utility, which is a really important council work session. It is for council to work together looking at their utility rate structure. It has already been to the utility advisory committee, and this is council's opportunity to discuss. There's not a public comment period for that. This is council's opportunity to discuss. There will be public hearings on that issue later in the process, but I wanted to remind council we have a meeting next Tuesday on the 27th. I also wanted to draw your attention to another item we have added to the September 3rd meeting, which is an item that staff agreed to do based on council direction at a prior meeting, which is utilize an ordinance to modify council meetings so that it does not fall on election night. And being that election night is coming up, that's an ordinance that we need to get through, and so we'll be bringing that to you at your next regular meeting on September 3rd. Another modification, we know how important the vacant properties discussion is to council, so we wanted to get that back on track as soon as possible. And right now we have scheduled that from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on October 1st. And so right now that is the plan for vacant properties. And then I want to highlight a significant change that I know will be disappointing to council, because I know how important it is that we get some housing code modifications moving forward. Those have moved forward to Planning Commission. They are in the works. But one of the things we were recently advised is that Washington State Department of Commerce, because they are modifications to Title 17, which is tied to the Growth Management Act, they are requiring a 60-day comment period to the Department of Commerce. So that slowed down our process, required us to move the 2 meetings we had scheduled for that discussion in September to the October 1st and October 15th City Council meetings for that discussion. I've got a number of items I want to share this evening. We do have a semi-annual update on the strategic plan, trying to provide council with updates on each specific item of the strategic plan. And obviously we'll continue to provide updates, but I think that's just an example of how much we've actually accomplished and been able to move forward with so far this year. I also want to highlight that in the under information in your council packet, we have provided the 2020 lodging tax application submittals that staff will likely be bringing forward as we promised at our last meeting. And that's something that we know council will have an opportunity to weigh in on after lodging tax reviews and makes recommendations. Ultimately, council has the final say on those applications. So we're not asking for a council decision tonight, but there will be a future council decision on those applications. Your building activity report for July is also in the packet. And then I want to talk a little bit about the item that was discussed as a late item, just because I think it's important to provide some information. I think I very much recognize, and I think staff does as well, how archaic our parking code is and how it's really challenging to go with a code that is very much outdated and that very much needs improvement. I think you have staff's full agreement that that code needs improvement. What I do want to speak to, though, is a concern that I have relative to some of the statements. And specifically, I want to share that we work very diligently to ensure that any business that has a parking issue, whether it's for an opening or an expansion, that we work diligently with them to get any parking issue resolved. I personally am not aware of any business that has not been able to open or expand because of a parking issue. We've worked really hard to work within the confines of the existing code to make sure parking is not a game stopper for a business. I think that's important to emphasize. If City Council ever becomes aware of such a situation where a business feels they cannot open because of a parking issue, I would ask that they direct that business owner to work with Director Brecky, and I'm confident that she will find a solution. If she does not, I would encourage them to come meet with me, and we will find some solutions that work. I can highlight numerous solutions that have been made for businesses within the context of code, but I want to get that corrected on the record. But secondly, I do think it's important that we value the desire and the need to change the parking code.
Do those solutions cost money?
That is a great point. Those solutions do oftentimes cost money. Any parking improvements do cost money when they're required.
Thank you.
And, so,
And then under one other item, if I could, and I think it's one that you may have also intended to mention, but I believe that the Greenlink project is actually holding a public open house this Saturday at the Carver Room at the library. I don't have a specific time, but it is this Saturday, I believe the 26th. And I believe it is scheduled in the afternoon, but I don't have the time, but feel free to contact City Hall for the correct time on that.
yes, so Saturday the 24th, 12 to 2.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me, I totally forgot that. And there was actually one more item on the traffic camera information. Does that move to a different time or place?
Thank you. That is an error in your schedule. We will be rescheduling that.
Okay, thank you.
I think that it really deserves to be highlighted that the fire department community paramedics mid-year report was also in that city manager's response, and I read that report and I emailed Chief Community about it. I know that he's on our schedule too, probably with the presentation, but this is one of the most, I think, impactful changes that we have made that our community will start feeling. If looking at that EMS utilization chart in there to see people that have had, over a dozen calls for service in a 6-month period, multiple transports, and reducing those to single digits, 0 transports, has been amazing work done by the fire department in partnership with, a lot of different agencies. And I really would encourage everyone, the media, to read that report, really dive into it, because we have shown, I think, an amazing, proof of concept for that program, and I really hope that we can find some community support to continue it.
No, thank you for bringing that up, because that report was really, really interesting, so, as to the numbers, it was stunning, actually.
And Madam Mayor, Chief Dubuque wasn't able to be here this evening, but he will be presenting on that at the next meeting.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, we are now on to the second public comment period of the night. So, please step up.
Melanie Smith. Uber drivers are driver partners operating as independent contractors. They are freelancers. They're not employees of any company except themselves. So each driver is a standalone business working for themselves according to the National Labor Relations Board of the Department of Labor. They're in business for themselves and themselves alone. So does that mean that ordinance says that every one of them, being independent, standalone businesses, need to pay that business license? Seattle has that rule. Matter of fact, in Seattle, you have to pay $50 if you make under $20,000 and $110 if you pay over. So I'm really wondering, the ordinance you just passed isn't clear, and what Mr. Bloor said wasn't correct. Uber and Lyft are not paying the city $50 for a license. So if you have 10 drivers, are those 10 drivers needing to pay $50? And if so, why? It seems to me that Mr. Bloor does not understand the gig economy, and he misled you. So I'd like this ordinance changed to clarify that. Because it's not fair to our citizens. And if you're talking about compassion, adding $50 to someone's cost to do business is kind of expensive, considering this is an area that's going to get a whole lot of Lyft traffic, or Uber traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anybody else?
Hi, John Ralston, city resident. Love the discussion about parking. My one item that I'm concerned about is hopefully the issue doesn't lead to a great reduction or some changes, a great reduction in parking or changes to the possibility of sale of the property that's adjacent to the old police station downtown. I think maintaining that parking, or that parking count, is important for the facility that's going to be potentially built across the street to the north. Second item, I still want to go on the record again for this tax that may come about to support the homeless needs for housing, that there be a sunset clause of some sort in the tax of a minimum of 3 years, a maximum of 7. And thirdly, I want to thank Councilperson Moran on the report he gave a couple of weeks ago about visiting the cabling ship down at the port. I believe it was Councilman Moran that gave that, was it? Oh, it was Mike. My apologies. I saw them as a group. There were either 12 or 14 of them having dinner in town on Friday night. I suspected it was their crew. They were at a nice restaurant. I was also having dinner there. And I personally thanked them, and I also bought them a real nice bottle of wine.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to speak to council on any item that you would like? All right, I guess seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all for attending. I really appreciate you being here.